The sun was just beginning to rise, streaking the neighborhood in shades of gold and orange, when my morning began. My wife was making breakfast, the smell of butter and eggs filling the kitchen, while my 8-year-old son, Ethan, sat at the table coloring a picture he had been working on for days. He was drawing a race car, bright red with silver stripes, his small hands moving quickly with crayons. He was so proud of that drawing, and like any father, I felt a swell of pride just watching him. We had lived in this neighborhood for nearly 5 years. It was supposed to be quiet, safe, and family-oriented, the kind of place where kids rode bikes on the sidewalk, neighbors waved to one another, and everyone shared small talk while watering their lawns. But like every paradise, there was a snake. In this case, that snake had a name, Karen. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She had built herself a reputation as the loudest, rudest, and most entitled woman in the subdivision. Everything had to go her way. If a dog barked too loudly, she reported it. If someone parked in front of her house, even though it was a public street, she would storm outside, flapping her arms like some deranged bird, screaming about her rights. The worst part wasn't even her behavior. It was her son, Tyler. Tyler was about 11, 3 years older than Ethan. But instead of being the protective, older kid type, he was a spoiled brat. His mother never told him no. If he wanted something, she bought it. If he got in trouble, she excused him. If another child stood up to him, she would march over to that child's parents and demand they apologize to her son. Everyone in the neighborhood knew what Tyler was like, and most parents quietly told their kids to avoid him. But Ethan was different. My boy was kind-hearted and gentle. He didn't understand why someone would be mean for no reason. To him, every kid was a potential friend. And despite my warnings, he sometimes tried to play with Tyler, only to come home disappointed, sometimes even in tears. That Saturday morning, everything started out normal. After breakfast, Ethan wanted to go outside to ride his bike. My wife and I agreed, reminding him to stay near the cul-de-sac where I could see him from the front porch. He put on his little blue helmet, grabbed his shiny bike, the one he had gotten for his last birthday, and pedaled happily down the driveway. His laughter echoed as he circled the street, waving to our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Green, who always sat on her porch knitting. I sat down with a cup of coffee, finally enjoying a moment of peace. But peace never lasts long when Karen and her son are around. About 10 minutes later, I noticed Tyler walking down the sidewalk. He had that cocky swagger he always wore, a smirk plastered across his face like he owned the world. He carried a cheap plastic bat, the kind kids use for backyard baseball. My stomach tightened immediately. I could tell by the way Tyler was looking at Ethan's bike that trouble was coming. He shouted something at my son, though I couldn't hear it at first. Ethan slowed his bike, smiling politely, probably thinking Tyler wanted to play. But instead of friendliness, Tyler blocked his path. I set my coffee down, already on edge. Then it happened, so fast, I didn't even have time to react. Tyler raised the bat and swung it hard, not at the bike, but at my son's head. The sickening thud still echoes in my mind. Ethan let out a sharp cry, toppled sideways, and hit the pavement with a painful crack. His helmet had absorbed some of the blow, but it wasn't enough. He clutched his head, tears streaming, while Tyler stood over him, laughing like it was the funniest thing he'd ever done. "What the hell?" I roared, leaping off the porch and sprinting toward them. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might rip through my chest. My son was hurt. And some spoiled brat had done it on purpose. By the time I reached Ethan, his little body was trembling, his face pale, his hands covering his forehead where a red mark was already swelling. I dropped to my knees, scooping him gently into my arms, checking his pupils, checking his breathing, all the frantic instincts of a terrified father. And then I heard it. That shrill, unmistakable voice that made every muscle in my body clench. "Tyler! What did that brat do to you this time?" Karen came marching down the street like a general entering a battlefield. She didn't even look at Ethan. Her eyes were locked on me, full of accusation, like somehow this was my son's fault. "Your kid attacked mine," she screeched, jabbing a finger toward me. "You better control him before I call the police." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My boy was lying in my arms, injured and crying, and this woman had the audacity to act like her son was the victim. "You're insane," I snapped, trying to keep my voice from shaking with rage. "I saw exactly what happened. Your son hit mine in the head with a bat. He could have killed him." Karen's face twisted, but not with shame or guilt. "No," she doubled down. "Tyler would never do that. You're making up lies to cover for your undisciplined child. Everyone knows Ethan is too sensitive. Maybe if you weren't such a soft parent, your kid wouldn't be crying over a little bump." My hands clenched into fists, but I forced myself to stay focused on Ethan, who was still sobbing softly against my chest. I wanted nothing more than to stand up and put Karen in her place, but my son came first. "Go inside," I told my wife, who had rushed out after hearing the commotion. She was already on the phone with 911, her hands shaking. "Call an ambulance. Tell them it's a head injury." Karen gasped dramatically. "An ambulance? For that? Oh please, you're just trying to make a scene. If anyone should be in trouble here, it's your son for provoking Tyler." That was the moment something inside me snapped. I stood up slowly, cradling Ethan in my arms, and looked Karen straight in the eyes. "Listen to me carefully," I said in a voice that was deadly calm. "If my son suffers so much as a concussion, because of what your boy did, you're going to regret ever stepping foot in this neighborhood. Do you understand me?" Her smirk faltered, just for a second. But of course, Karen being Karen, she quickly recovered and started screaming about lawsuits and harassment. Tyler stood behind her, still holding the bat, looking smug and unbothered. But deep down, I already knew something she didn't. Something that would soon change everything. Karen thought she was untouchable. She thought her bratty son could do whatever he wanted without consequence. What she didn't realize was that my family had far more support and connections than she could ever imagine. And when she finally discovered who was standing behind us, who my wife's mother really was, Karen's smug little empire of entitlement was going to crumble into dust. Because my son wasn't just anyone's grandson. He was her grandson. And that truth was about to hit Karen harder than any bat ever could. The ambulance's wailing siren still haunts me. I remember the flashing lights reflecting off the houses in our neighborhood as paramedics rushed out, carrying their bags and stretcher. Ethan lay pale and trembling, his little hands gripping mine with desperation. His helmet had done its job, but the swelling on his forehead was alarming, and I wasn't about to take chances with a head injury. The paramedics lifted him gently, one checking his vitals while another strapped him onto the stretcher. My wife climbed in immediately, holding Ethan's hand as they secured him. I was about to follow when a police cruiser pulled up, lights flashing. Of course. Someone had called them. I glanced back, and there she was, Karen, standing tall on the sidewalk like she was the hero of this story. Her son, Tyler, leaned against her, pretending to look scared, though I caught that smug glint in his eyes. The officer, a tall man with a trimmed beard, stepped out and walked toward us. "We got a call about a neighborhood altercation involving children. Can someone explain what's going on?" Before I could open my mouth, Karen launched into her performance. "Officer. Thank goodness you're here. she cried dramatically, clutching Tyler like he was some kind of war survivor. This man's child attacked my sweet boy for no reason. Tyler was just walking home when that wild kid started yelling at him and tried to hit him. Tyler defended himself, of course, but now they're trying to make it look like my son is the bad one. It's ridiculous. The audacity nearly made my jaw hit the ground. My son had nearly been concussed, and she was painting her brat as the victim. I stepped forward, my hands clenched at my sides. That is a lie. Officer, I watched the whole thing. Her son hit my boy in the head with that bat he's still holding. Look at it, it has scuff marks from the impact. If Ethan hadn't been wearing a helmet, we'd be talking about a much worse situation. The officer glanced at the bat, then at Tyler, who immediately dropped it to the grass like it had suddenly become too heavy to hold. His face flushed, but Karen quickly stepped in. Don't you dare accuse my son. He was defending himself. That other boy probably fell off his bike and hit his head, and now this man is trying to blame us to cover up his negligence. I want to press charges for harassment and defamation. I couldn't believe the level of lies spilling from her mouth. But before I could fire back, the officer raised a hand. All right, that's enough. I'll need to take both of your statements. The paramedics are taking the injured child to the hospital. Sir, I suggest you follow. You and your son stay here until I've got everything documented. I didn't waste another second. My son came first. I gave the officer a clipped nod, then rushed into my truck and tailed the ambulance to the hospital. The hospital. The sterile smell of disinfectant and the beeping of monitors filled the ER. Ethan lay on a bed, his small frame dwarfed by the white sheets. Doctors examined him carefully, running scans to check for fractures or internal bleeding. My wife sat by his side, brushing his hair back gently, whispering soothing words even though her own eyes were red from tears. Hours passed like years. Finally, the doctor returned with a clipboard in hand. Your son's going to be all right, he said, and those words felt like a lifeline. He has a mild concussion, but no skull fractures or internal bleeding. He'll need rest, monitoring, and follow-up care, but is out of immediate danger. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. Relief flooded through me, but it was quickly followed by anger. Because while my boy lay recovering, the person responsible was probably at home watching cartoons and eating snacks, completely unbothered. My wife looked at me, her voice trembling with fury. She let her son do this, and then she lied about it. She has no idea who she's dealing with. There it was. That edge in her tone, a reminder of something I hadn't brought up yet. Something Karen would regret ever ignoring. Because my wife's mother wasn't just another suburban grandma. No, she was a force of nature, someone Karen could never hope to intimidate. But I wasn't ready to unleash that card just yet. Police follow-up. 2 hours later, the same officer from earlier walked into the hospital waiting area. His notepad was tucked under his arm. I wanted to update you, he said calmly. I've spoken to a few neighbors who witnessed parts of the incident. Accounts vary, but several said they saw Tyler swing the bat. We're opening a case for reckless endangerment and aggravated assault. But given his age, it'll be handled through the juvenile system. Finally, the truth was beginning to surface. Good, I said firmly. Because if you hadn't, I was prepared to press charges myself. That boy needs to learn there are consequences. The officer nodded, but his eyes betrayed caution. I have to be honest. The mother is combative. She's already threatening to hire a lawyer and sue you for defamation. Of course she was. That was Karen's default move. I clenched my jaw. Let her. She has no idea what kind of legal battle she's about to step into. The officer gave me a curious look, but didn't press. Instead, he handed me his card. "We'll need your full written statement. We'll also follow up about the medical report for your son. This case isn't going away anytime soon." As he left, my wife leaned closer. Her voice was low, steady, but burning with intensity. She thinks she can twist this into her advantage. She thinks screaming and bluffing will save her. But she doesn't know Mom. The second she tries to drag us through the courts, she's going to learn who's really pulling the strings. I met her gaze, and for the first time that day, a flicker of satisfaction replaced my anger. Because she was right. Karen thought she had power in the neighborhood. She thought yelling loud enough could scare us into submission. But she had no clue that my wife's mother had influence far beyond our little cul-de-sac. Connections in law, politics, even law enforcement. She was the kind of woman who could silence a room with one look, the kind of woman you didn't cross if you valued your reputation or your freedom. And when Karen finally found out whose grandson Tyler had attacked, her entire smug facade would crumble. But for now, I stayed by my son's side, vowing silently that this was far from over. Karen wanted a fight. She had just picked one with the wrong family. By the time Ethan was stable enough to come home, word of the incident had already spread across the neighborhood like wildfire. I should have expected it. Gossip traveled faster than wildfire in a tight-knit community like ours. But I hadn't expected how quickly Karen would twist the story to suit her own narrative. The very next morning, before I'd even had a chance to drink my coffee, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Mrs. Lewis, a longtime neighbor from 2 houses down. She shifted uncomfortably on the porch, clearly caught between concern and curiosity. "I just wanted to check in on your boy," she said softly. "I heard he got hurt. Is he all right?" I thanked her and explained Ethan had a concussion, but would recover. Relief crossed her face, but then she lowered her voice. "You should know. Karen's been going door to door since last night. She's telling everyone your son attacked hers, and that you threatened her in front of witnesses. She says she's considering filing a restraining order." I felt the anger flare again, hot and uncontrollable. Not only had her son nearly smashed Ethan's skull, but now she was trying to turn the entire neighborhood against us. Mrs. Lewis must have seen my face tighten, because she patted my arm. "Don't worry. Not everyone believes her. Some of us saw Tyler swinging that bat. But you should be prepared. She's stirring up trouble." And she wasn't exaggerating. Karen's campaign. That afternoon, when I stepped outside to grab the mail, I noticed a group of neighbors gathered at the end of the cul-de-sac. Karen stood in the middle, her voice carrying like nails on a chalkboard. "And if we let people like them stay, our neighborhood will go downhill. Their kid is violent, their parenting is irresponsible, and they're dragging us all into drama. Do you want to live next to people who call ambulances for every little bump?" Tyler was by her side, arms folded, pretending to look wounded, though he smirked every time his mother glanced away. I walked closer, my presence silencing some of the murmurs. Karen immediately spotted me and puffed herself up, eager to perform. "Speak of the devil," she spat. "Here's the father of the boy who attacked my Tyler. Care to explain to everyone why you threatened me in the street yesterday?" I looked around, meeting the eyes of my neighbors. Some looked uncomfortable, others skeptical, but a few seemed to be nodding along with Karen. It made my blood boil. "My son," I said evenly, "was the one attacked. Several of you saw it with your own eyes." Tyler swung a bat at his head. "My boy ended up in the hospital with a concussion. That's not an accident. That's assault." Karen let out a laugh, so shrill it made a baby down the street start crying. "Oh please. He's exaggerating, because he's embarrassed his kid lost control. Don't let him fool you. People like this just want to play the victim and sue hard-working families like mine. The sheer audacity left me speechless for a moment. Hard-working family. Karen hadn't lifted a finger to work in years. Her ex-husband's money and her constant lawsuits against petty neighborhood grievances kept her comfortable. And then, just as I was about to snap back, a calm, commanding voice cut through the noise. Karen. That's enough. The arrival. Heads turned as a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and out stepped a woman who carried herself with the kind of quiet authority that made people instinctively straighten their posture. It was my mother-in-law. Her tailored suit, elegant jewelry, and steely gaze told everyone immediately that this was not someone to dismiss. She wasn't loud, she wasn't dramatic, she didn't need to be. Power radiated from her like a storm cloud on the horizon. Karen blinked, clearly thrown off, but quickly tried to recover. And who exactly are you? She sneered, her tone dripping with false confidence. My name, my mother-in-law said slowly, is Margaret. She paused just long enough to let the name settle. And I am Ethan's grandmother. I noticed the shift immediately. A couple of neighbors exchanged looks. Even those who didn't know her could sense something important had just happened. Karen scoffed. So what? You think, because you show up in some fancy car, people are going to believe your little sob story? Your grandson is the problem, not mine. Margaret took a single step closer, and the way Karen faltered back half an inch told me everything. She wasn't used to people who didn't flinch at her yelling. Let's be clear, Margaret said, her voice sharp but calm. I've already spoken with the police and with the doctors who treated Ethan. I also know several neighbors witnessed Tyler swinging that bat. I don't deal in rumors, Karen. I deal in facts. And the facts say your son committed an assault. Karen's face flushed red. You don't know what you're talking about. Tyler is a good boy. He would never. Save it, Margaret interrupted, her tone like steel. I have spent decades in courtrooms listening to liars, and you're not even good at it. If you continue slandering my grandson or this family, I'll make sure every legal avenue is pursued against you, and trust me when I say I have the resources to make sure you regret it. The crowd of neighbors had gone silent. Even Tyler shifted uncomfortably now, realizing this was no longer just a shouting match. Karen tried one last desperate jab. Are you threatening me? Margaret's lips curled into the faintest smile. No, Karen. I don't make threats. I make promises. The air was thick with tension. I could practically hear Karen's bravado cracking under the weight of my mother-in-law's presence. For once, she didn't have the upper hand. And for the first time since the incident, I felt a flicker of hope. Because Karen had no idea what storm she had just invited into her life. This wasn't just a neighborhood spat anymore. This was war, and she was about to find out she was hopelessly outmatched. The following days were a whirlwind. Between doctor's appointments, police reports, and Ethan's recovery at home, my wife and I barely had time to breathe. But through it all, Margaret, my mother-in-law, was a constant, unshakable presence. She moved with precision, making phone calls, speaking with officials, and ensuring every detail of the case was airtight. Watching her work was like watching a general coordinate a battle. Calm, ruthless, and efficient. Karen, on the other hand, continued her circus. She filed a complaint with the Homeowners Association, demanding we be fined for endangering the community. She posted long rants on social media, painting Tyler as the innocent victim of bully neighbors. She even tried to stage another gathering in front of her house, waving around some half-written petition calling for our removal from the neighborhood. But the tide was already turning. Neighbors who had once kept quiet were starting to speak out. Several came to us privately, offering to give statements to the police. One elderly man, Mr. Harris, said plainly, "I saw that boy swing the bat. And I saw Karen laughing about it later. She's not going to twist this one." Even the HOA, usually spineless in the face of Karen's tantrums, began distancing themselves. Too many people had seen too much. And then came the hearing. Juvenile court. The juvenile court building wasn't large or impressive, but the tension inside it was suffocating. Tyler sat beside Karen, slouched in his chair, looking more annoyed than remorseful. Karen was dressed in her usual overdone style, a blazer that screamed cheap knockoff, and too much jewelry clinking every time she moved her hands. We sat across from them, Margaret in the middle, radiating authority. She wasn't Ethan's attorney, she didn't need to be. But her reputation carried weight. More than one official had greeted her by name, their tones laced with respect. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, reviewed the file before her. "We are here regarding the assault incident involving minors. The victim, Ethan, sustained a concussion after being struck with a bat. Multiple witnesses have given statements confirming that Tyler initiated the attack. Tyler, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Tyler shrugged, mumbling, "He was annoying me." Karen immediately jumped in, her voice sharp and shrill. "Your Honor, my son was provoked. That other boy harassed him for weeks, and when Tyler defended himself, they exaggerated his injuries to make him look guilty. This entire thing is a witch hunt." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Simmons, I've reviewed the medical records and the police report. The evidence is clear. Your son struck another child in the head with a blunt object. That is not defending himself. That is an assault." Karen sputtered, her face turning red, but the judge silenced her with a raised hand. "Tyler will be enrolled in mandatory anger management classes and community service. He is also placed on probation. Any further incidents will escalate his charges." Karen shot up from her chair. "This is outrageous. You can't do this to my son. He's just a child." And that's when Margaret finally leaned forward, her voice calm but cutting. "Your son is a child, yes. But he nearly killed mine. And you encouraged it with your lies. Consider yourself fortunate that this is all he's facing. If it were up to me, you'd be the one answering for your behavior in court." The judge gave a small nod, as if silently agreeing, before banging the gavel. Case closed. The aftermath. Leaving the courthouse, Karen tried one last desperate tactic. She cornered us in the parking lot, her voice trembling between rage and panic. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you can just come into this neighborhood and ruin my life? You don't scare me." Margaret turned slowly, her eyes locking onto Karen's. And in that moment, it felt like the entire world went quiet. "You should be scared," Margaret said softly. "Not because of me. Not even because of the law. But because one day, your son will realize what kind of mother raised him, and he'll hate you for it. That will be your punishment, Karen. Not mine." Karen froze. For the first time since I'd known her, she had no comeback. No scream, no insult. Just silence. She yanked Tyler's arm and stormed off, her heels clicking furiously against the pavement. Healing. Back at home, Ethan's recovery became our focus. He was resilient, stronger than I gave him credit for. Within a week, he was up and about, though we kept a close watch. His helmet, cracked where Tyler's bat had landed, sat on a shelf in the garage, a reminder of how close we had come to tragedy. The neighborhood, once tense and divided, began to shift. Parents stopped pretending Tyler was just misunderstood. Children no longer played near Karen's house. Slowly, the power she had wielded through fear and manipulation crumbled. And us. We became stronger. Bound tighter as a family, reminded of how fragile safety can be, but also how powerful it is to stand together. One evening, as the sun set and the cicadas hummed, Ethan curled up beside me on the porch. "Dad," he said quietly, "why did Tyler hit me?" I wrapped an arm around him, pulling him close. "Because some people don't know how to be kind. But that's not your fault. You did nothing wrong." He thought about that, then nodded. "Grandma said he's gonna have to clean parks and stuff now." "That's good. Maybe he'll learn." I smiled, ruffling his hair. "Maybe he will." And as I looked across the quiet street, the shadows lengthening, I knew one thing for certain: Karen had finally learned what it meant to cross the wrong family. Because behind my little boy stood love, truth, and a grandmother whose shadow stretched farther than Karen could ever hope to reach. And that was something no spoiled brat or entitled parent could ever smash, no matter how hard they tried.